It begins like every productivity sermon you've ever heard. An alarm splits the dark at 5 a.m. A hand reaches for the phone. The body drags itself into a shower so cold it feels like punishment disguised as virtue. Matcha froths in a glass. A journal opens to another affirmation copied from someone else's success story. The camera pans across a meticulously planned desk, a calendar full of workouts, readings, deep work blocks. And sitting in the middle of all that sterile order is a man with dead eyes. Efficient, productive, hollow. We've confused the light that wakes us with the light that moves us. The culture told us salvation hid behind a perfect morning. If only we could stack the right habits, sync them with the right playlist, and post them with the right filter. But the truth is more brutal. You perfected your routine, yet forgotten your mission. You've honed the ritual, yet dulled the blade. What was once meant to sharpen the spirit has turned into a performance of control, another mirror selfie for the soul. The lie is not the structure, it's the worship of it. The world has mistaken precision for purpose, checklist for character, progress bar for presence. We arise earlier, move faster, track better, but few of us are awake. The problem isn't the act of rising early, it's rising empty. The samurai never recited affirmations into the mirror, he inherited silence. His day began not with caffeine but clarity, not with steps to success but with an unspoken prayer to live today as if already dead. He did not have a morning routine. He had a way, a sacred rhythm rooted in awareness rather than achievement. The modern man collects habits like trophies but forgets the war they were meant to win. Every cold shower, every meditation app, every journal entry has become theater without truth. We've made stillness another metric to measure, another pursuit to control. But discipline birthed from vanity collapses under chaos. Discipline born from presence becomes art. The samurai understood that repetition without reverence is emptiness. To live as a warrior was not to master sequence, but to master tension. Modern men chase methods because they've lost meaning. Algorithms promise transformation. Ads preach rebirth at dawn. Yet the emptiness remains because no routine can replace resolve. We worship the external show of discipline because it distracts us from the internal void. The world says efficiency is enlightenment. But efficiency with no soul is machinery. The warrior knew that the morning was sacred only if he was sacred in it. The modern man hacks his life. The ancient one hallowed it. The first drinks coffee to wake up. The second breathes deeply to remember that is alive. So before chasing another perfect start, pause. Feel the pulse of existence before the noise begins. Because peace isn't built through calendar blocks, it's remembered through silence. The samurai's dawn was wordless, yet each movement declared life's ultimate vow, to meet the day with clarity, to greet death without fear. The world teaches you to chase time, the way teaches you to transcend it. The next step toward real discipline isn't on your planner. It's buried under the static of your over-designed mornings. To find it again, you must strip away the performance, let the mirror fog, let the list burn. Beneath the ashes waits something older than motivation, an echo that whispers every sunrise the same command. Remember who you are before you begin. To understand what real discipline means, we must go back, centuries back, to the men who watched dawn rise not as a productivity window but as a meditation on mortality. The cold air in their lungs wasn't a hack, it was a reminder. Somewhere beyond the sterile glow of screens and self-help slogans lies that same quiet courtyard, waiting. The world of doing fades, and the way of being begins. Every man taught to chase productivity begins from the wrong end of the blade. He hurries toward action, forgetting that all true movement begins in stillness. Zen is the art of seeing before doing, of making contact with a void from which all form arises. In it, silence is not absence but origin. To the samurai, it was the first lesson in the final test. Before gripping the sword, master your breath. Before meeting an enemy, meet your own mind. The masters call this Mushin, the mind without clutter, untouched by panic, comparison, or noise. It is not emptiness as in nothingness. It is emptiness as in freedom. The modern man, trained by screens and schedules, fears stillness because it reveals how scattered he has become. He fills dawn with stimulus to avoid meeting himself. But the warrior understood that silence is not laziness, it is readiness. In the hush before battle, he could feel the subtle rhythm of existence, each heartbeat a teacher. From that awareness, every motion became precise, necessary, calm. Productivity, stripped to its bones, is not about more output. It's about undisturbed contact between intention and action. The samurai did not rise and think of routines or hacks. He returned to discipline as one might return to breath. Each dawn was a purification. The courtyard stone was cold under his feet, mist hanging over the earth, the taste of life and permanence resting on his tongue. He was taught that death could visit by noon, and so each morning was not time management but resurrection. Through death's shadow, every motion owned its meaning. This intimacy with mortality refined focus into something sacred. What we call burnout, the samurai would see as a fracture between body and spirit, a man moving fast but with no root. Zen rebuilt that root. Kaizen, the doctrine of continuous refinement, was not endless striving. It was presence revisited daily, improvement through awareness, not anxiety. To refine one's art meant removing everything wasteful, each unnecessary swing, each crowded thought. Modern mornings are cluttered by noise disguised as excellence, screens, alerts, motivational clamors. But every hack that adds another layer dulls a sword. The samurai sharpened his steel only to cut, not to keep polishing for praise. Modern men spend their lives sharpening the sword endlessly, fearing battle, mistaking preparation for mastery. There is no perfection in the idle blade, only rust that glitters under artificial light. Reiji the sacred. Order reminded the warrior that the smallest gestures were holy, bowing before the weapon, kneeling before the tatami mats. Handling each movement with reverence was not superstition but structure. Ritual gave shape to purpose. When the world feels chaotic, order is found through deliberate conduct. Reiji teaches that posture is philosophy made physical. We sit straight not to impress, but to remember the spine of discipline. Every bow was a reset, a manual return to humility. The modern man bows only to urgency. The ancient bowed to awareness itself. In our obsession to automate everything, we have turned repetition into monotony instead of meditation. The samurai's monotony was sacred. Repetition woven with intention transforms boredom into beauty. Presence, then, is not passivity. The crouched archer waiting in silence is not idle, is listening for truth. Stillness is a ground upon which effective action stands. Without it, ambition becomes chaos, stress, and effort. It is a pulse beneath clarity, the breath before creation, the pause that distinguishes strike from flail. Real productivity begins when the noise ceases long enough for purpose to speak. Zen whispers, remove, and you will remember. True focus does not come from adding. It is born the moment you subtract everything irrelevant.so. Before sunrise, stand still. Barefoot if you can. Let the air settle around you. Do nothing heroic. Breathe in the world until it breathes back. Feel the gentle tremor that says, you are part of something ancient, and it asks only for your attention. In this 1 minute of surrender, you learn more about discipline than 1,000 motivational clips can teach. For that moment, you aren't mastering the morning, you are meeting it. The distinction changes everything. Stillness is not an end, it is preparation. The training of the mind births the training of the body. Just as a blade is meaningless without motion, awareness is incomplete without application. The samurai's peace was always waiting to be tested. He bowed, breathed, became the still pond, and then moved like water in a storm. Stillness alone shapes nothing. A warrior's peace is only proven in motion. The samurai did not divide his life into fragments. Every breath, gesture, and act was a reflection of his code, Bushido, the way of the warrior. It was not a set of rules carved into stone, but a living rhythm embedded into his days. Bushido carried 7 virtues: rectitude, courage, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, and loyalty. Each served not as decoration for wisdom, but as a spine for being. Modern men, deprived of codes, drift between habits like lost travelers chasing cell signals. But Bushido is a forgotten architecture of grounded life. It turns the chaos of hours into a disciplined dance. What if, instead of a morning routine, you built a code that forged your spirit daily? Rectitude, or GI, was the first virtue, the ability to choose a straight path even when it cuts deeper. For a warrior, the blade without moral clarity was mere metal. For modern life, rectitude means knowing your aim before you wake. Before the screen flashes, the notifications call, the mind should already be aligned. Too many men return each morning without direction, navigating by the demands of others. Discipline begins when decisions are made in silence long before chaos begins. The samurai sword swung only for purpose. Your mind must cut the same way. Ask yourself, who are you serving when you rise? If the morning doesn't answer that, even the most efficient day is wasted motion. Then comes courage, not the ego-flavored bravado of social media, but quiet defiance against comfort. Every dawn challenges you with small resistances, the temptation to snooze, the lure of the screen, the soft lie of 5 more minutes. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to negotiate with it. The samurai met uncertainty with grace because he rehearsed death daily. He looked at mortality and said, I will not flinch. You, in your bed, stare at a different kind of death, the death of potential, every time you retreat from discomfort. Courage is the art of stepping into cold air, into silence, into discipline without applause. Benevolence followed, the virtue of compassion through strength. The modern man often confuses discipline with punishment, turning self-improvement into warfare against his own humanity. Benevolence transforms discipline into service. Each act of order becomes a gift to all who depend on your stability. To keep yourself sharp, reliable, and whole is an act of generosity. True strength is never self-centered. It radiates ease to others because it is forged in calm, not aggression. The samurai training alone did not seek perfection for vanity's sake. He did so to be of use when duty called. So too must modern discipline become sacred stewardship, care for your craft, your people, your mind. Respect, or reiji, is a fourth pillar, the binding grace that elevates routine into ritual. The samurai did not separate respect from reality. He bowed before the sword not to worship it, but to remember humility before responsibility. We must treat our environments the same way. Every action, making your bed, lighting your workspace, preparing your tools, is a bow to order. It cleanses a field of chaos before battle begins. The world calls this boring. The warrior calls it beautiful. Respect transforms repetition into reverence. It removes a need for intensity and replaces it with consistency. You begin each morning not as a man chasing progress, but as one protecting sacred ground. Honesty, Makoto, comes next, truth in word and motion. In Bushido, dishonesty toward oneself was the most shameful betrayal. The mirror of the warrior was clear because he never fogged it with excuses. Modern self-deception was the mask of ambition. We say we are working when scrolling feeds, researching when avoiding the task. Honesty burns that fog away. It demands silent accountability. Every time you meet resistance, answer with truth. Am I moving with integrity or escaping discomfort? That question alone distinguishes the discipline from the delusional. Honor, meo, and loyalty, chugi, close the circle. Honor is living aligned with your code when no one watches. Loyalty is anchoring that alignment in devotion to something greater than ego. Without honor, routines are shallow. Without loyalty, they dissolve under pressure. To serve your path consistently requires belonging to something beyond yourself, an idea, a mission, a principle. The samurai's loyalty was to his master. Yours must be to the highest self, demanding evolution. Each morning, recommit to that unseen commander. When fatigue whispers rebellion, remember the vow. Discipline is not restriction, it's remembrance. Bushido applied to time looks like art. The warrior's kata, his repeated movement drills, were choreography for the soul. Each strike rehearsed not violence, but attention. The world now prefers checklists, soulless formations of tasks. The difference is profound. The kata molds a man. The checklist only manages him. The first hour of a day should be treated as kata, a deliberate sequence that shapes identity rather than measures performance. A simple framework: wake in silence, return to stillness, sharpen presence, and strike one decisive action. Not 10 tasks, just one performed with absolute precision and awareness. This is a warrior's first hour, where quality outweighs quantity, and motion bows to meaning. Kaizen, continual refinement, threads through it all. Each dawn is a new dojo. The goal is never perfection, only improvement. The samurai never declared mastery, only deeper sincerity in practice. Apply this to the modern morning. If yesterday was chaos, today is atonement through clarity. Do not mourn inconsistency, refine it. Even failure, viewed through Kaizen, is training. The rhythm is patient. Rise, refine, repeat. From these principles, modern life gains spine. Your morning transforms from mechanical efficiency into spiritual calibration. Every repeated act becomes a chisel-carving identity. The ancient sword cuts across centuries, reminding you that routines are not cages but canvases for consciousness. Bushido's power lies in this paradox: obedience births freedom. Structure does not confine, it liberates attention from chaos. But remember, the sword's lesson is incomplete without fire. Rhythm teaches coordination, fire teaches endurance. Stillness sharpens a blade, yet without struggle it remains decorative. The calm kata must one day meet the storm. For if the sword teaches rhythm, the fire teaches endurance, and that's where most modern men falter. Something broke beneath the surface of modern ambition. A generation of men, armed with planners and caffeine, marched into their days like soldiers without cause. They built entire empires out of checklists, podcasts, and productivity dashboards, and still felt hollow. Discipline became not devotion, but performance. We no longer seek mastery, we seek visibility. Our heroes are influencers selling routines, not warriors living codes. We have mistaken exhaustion for excellence, obsession for order, constant activity for control. In this new marketplace of self-improvement, every man is a brand, each breath another obligation to optimize. But efficiency is not mastery. Busyness is not purpose. Motion, when severed from meaning, mutates into madness. Burnout is not failure. It is the body revolting against enslavement by the mind. It is spirit's final plea: remember me. Scroll through the world of grind culture and you find priests of fatigue preaching salvation through suffering. Wake earlier, stack more habits, sacrifice rest for results. They call it discipline, but it is deprivation dressed as virtue. We chase endless output as if the human soul were an algorithm that could be scaled. In truth, intempered fire eventually devours its wielder. The samurai knew this long before psychology gave it a label. Fire alone destroys. To lead the mind without the temper of stillness is to wield a sword that turns inward. The masters taught that discipline without inner balance is simply ego with a schedule. A warrior who cannot stand still is a weapon without safety. Burnout is too much fire, not enough water. It is masculine energy without grounding grace. The modern man lives entirely in ignition, stimulation, ambition, competition. His body runs while his spirit waits for him to notice it still exists. He calls his exhaustion productivity because slowing down now feels like guilt. But in the old way, stillness was strength itself. The Zen monk and the samurai shared one truth: the battle was not against time, but against distraction from being. When you fight everything, you become the war. The more we resist rest, the more chaos grows within us. The obsession with control destroys the very focus it seeks to preserve. The samurai balances training with breath. Every strike began with exhale, every movement with awareness. Even his violent art was performed as meditation. The sword was never separate from silence. Within the clash, there was calm. That paradox, fire held inside stillness, is what modern men have forgotten. They act from tension, not awareness, mistaking intensity for depth. Real power is combustion under control. It's the bonfire that warms, not the wildfire that consumes. The Zen master once said, "The tighter you grip sand, the faster it escapes." So it is with modern discipline. The harder you grasp, the less remains till heal the fracture. The practice must change shape. Instead of adding another task labeled mindfulness, create stillness checkpoints throughout your day, moments where you stop, breathe, and return awareness to the present. Before meetings, between messages, as your hand reaches for the phone, pause, feel the impulse living in the body, then soften it. That single breath resets the entire system. It's the modern translation of the samurai's bow before each duel, a simple act of recalibration. A man who remembers to breathe remembers his strength. These micro-pauses remind you that your worth is not tied to speed, that life is not a contest of accumulation but of awareness. Burnout is cured not by retreat or more strategy, but by alignment. You do not need more motivation. You need permission to stop equating stillness with failure. The samurai who sits in meditation with sword resting across his knees is not idle. He is sharpening the invisible. The Western mind fears stillness because it confuses movement with progress. But the ancient path calls you to invert the logic. Stillness is motion's root, silence its source. From here, the path narrows not toward more control, but toward surrender. Stop polishing the cage and call it progress. Stop mistaking exhaustion for evolution. Let stillness reclaim its dignity. You were never meant to burn forever. You were meant to burn clean. The wind returns to calm, and the temple bell vibrates faintly across centuries. The greatest warriors stop conquering the world when they learn to conquer motion itself. Every true path of mastery bends toward paradox. You strive until striving dissolves. You discipline until discipline disappears. This is Mushin no Shin, the mind without mind, the pure state where action flows unhindered by hesitation, ego, or analysis. It is not apathy but absolute absorption, where the line between you and the act dissolves like ink in water. The Zen masters described it as fighting without fighting, moving without moving, achieving without effort. The modern world misunderstands this as relaxation or detachment, but Mushin is neither passive nor numb. Its motion so certain it no longer needs permission. Its awareness so deep it no longer wavers toward thought. That is the highest form of control, control refined until it feels like freedom. Picture Miyamoto Musashi, the greatest Jewish Japan ever knew, standing in a standoff just before dawn. The river near him is silent, mystic as breath. His opponent waits, sword drawn. To the observer, Musashi seems casual, almost unguarded. But within, there's no storm, only a mirror-still lake. His body knows what to do because thousands of repetitions have erased doubt. When the final step comes, it's seamless, no hesitation, no decision, just a sword and man moving as one. Musashi wins not through force but absence of panic, of vanity, of self. The same principle that guided the blade can guide your life. The duel isn't always fought on a battlefield. Sometimes it's against distraction, procrastination, confusion. The one who acts from Mushin, the mind without noise, always cuts cleanly, because he no longer wastes energy debating the act. True discipline matures into flow when conscious effort yields to embodied rhythm. You've repeated the move so many times that it no longer needs instruction. It's the pianist's hands that no longer think, the athlete who feels timing instead of measuring it, the craftsman whose tools seem alive with his intent. Modern productivity culture tries to mimic this through automation, through systems and tools meant to save decisions. But that misses the essence. Flow is not the absence of choice, it's a perfection of alignment. Your actions and your purpose breathe the same air. You no longer strive to optimize, because what is optimized cannot be sacred. The sacred must be lived. The world says grind. Musashi says flow. Grinding is friction against life. Flow is cooperation with it. Grinding dulls a blade. Flow sharpens it through effortless motion. Find this rhythm. You must unlearn your obsession with controlling outcomes. Effort is necessary, but attachment to effort is poison. You plant, but you cannot pull the seed to grow faster. You act, but you cannot command arrival. Flow begins where insistence ends. Stop optimizing your routine into sterility and start embodying it into art. The moment you stop watching yourself perform, presence takes over. A warrior's strike, a writer's sentence, a father's conversation, when performed from presence, becomes seamless, complete. The smallest act can become timeless if performed without tension. But because a modern man has been hypnotized by striving, he forgets how to release. Controlled surrender is his medicine. Every morning before you begin your task, try this. Exhale fully until breath leaves the body like a sigh of centuries. Drop your shoulders. Let gravity remind you that you are supported. Then act. Never start from tension. Start from grounding. This breath is a silent ode to peace before battle, a reminder that anxiety is not fuel but friction. From this state, everything sharpens, the words flow cleaner, the focus deepens, the distractions fade. I end time, even breath is forgotten, and the doing becomes being. That is a hidden reward of discipline properly lived. It frees you from needing constant discipline. Flow is not something you chase. It is what remains when you stop chasing. The man who fights himself to focus can only win through surrender, not of effort, but of excess. Controlled surrender means trusting the training, trusting the rhythm, trusting life's current to carry you where raw force never could. Yet flow cannot exist in a vacuum. The current needs direction. Rhythm requires aim. Presence is power, but it crumbles without purpose. Even Musashi's sword, perfect in movement, is just metal if swung for no reason. The path demands more than freedom, it demands cause. And so the blade must now turn toward meaning. Because even the strongest blade is meaningless if it defends no cause that a samurai's life was measured not by length, wealth, or achievement, but by alignment. Every act was an echo of his honor, every gesture a mirror reflecting the integrity of his inner world. For him, honor was not a concept, it was air, the unseen element that made breathing itself sacred. When he bowed, when he drew his blade, when he chose restraint instead of rage, he was worshipping that invisible bond between word and deed. The samurai understood Meo honor and Gi righteousness, not as ideals but as lived geometry, the straight spine of existence that must never bend, even under fear. In their world, hypocrisy was death before death. To act against one's code was to sever the connection between spirit and action, to fracture the soul's architecture. A man without honor was not truly alive. He was an echo chasing applause. Today, men have traded that North Star for a constellation of distractions. Trends replace truth. Approval replaces conviction. We worship relevance instead of righteousness. The noise of modern culture seduces us into perpetual drift, a digital ocean of opinions dressed as wisdom. The samurai carried no such burden. He did not seek validation from crowds because he already stood inside his own law. Modern men could rediscover power the moment they choose principle over performance. Real discipline is not a habit. It is allegiance to something that outlives preference that we've been taught to chase efficiency. But efficiency without direction is a circle. Productivity, when divorced from meaning, becomes servitude to time. The samurai didn't aim to be busy. He aimed to be worthy. His service to family, to clan, to duty was his meditation on purpose. That perspective changes everything. When you wake with purpose tethered to service, every mundane act becomes spiritual. Making coffee can be devotion. Sending an email can be stewardship. Even stillness becomes obedience to meaning. Productivity must therefore be reframed, not as output for praise, but as clarity in motion, service to what matters. You work not to chase, but to embody. To anchor this truth in daily life. Craft your own warrior's oath, a single sentence that names a law you will not betray. It must feel ancient even if written tonight. Something like, I will leave no action without awareness, or I will build nothing that dishes my peace. This oath is not affirmation, it is vow. Unlike goals, it cannot be postponed. It is a standard you rise with and the silence you sleep beside. While the world keeps rewriting what success means, your oath remains unmoving, a lone mountain in fog. When temptation pulls you sideways, this promise pulls you back to center. Simplicity is strength. Every additional rule only weakens resolve. The samurai needed no complex system because his word was as structured. A disciplined life, when stripped of noise, is just one sacred promise kept again and again. That is a real routine, not a sequence of optimized habits, but a continuity of inner truth. The morning isn't sacred because of what you do. It's sacred because of how aligned you are when you do it. Rituals gain power only through awareness carried through them. Without mindfulness, the perfect schedule is just decoration for confusion. But with honor guiding every act, even the smallest task becomes ceremony. We live in an age that confuses rebellion with authenticity, but the deeper rebellion now is steadiness. To hold your word when the culture celebrates contradiction, that is power. To act without audience, to choose integrity over immediacy, to define your value by your vow, that is a new Bushido. Once oath meets daily ritual, the modern man ceases to imitate discipline. He becomes discipline. The dawn waits quietly beyond the window. Ink brushes against paper. A man writes his code for the final time, not to impress, but to remember. The soft pulse of a drum begins in his chest. The world does not need another strategy. It needs men whose souls are pointed north. Honor is not nostalgia. It is navigation. The journey began like a man waking into another borrowed morning, chasing borrowed rules. The mirror reflected a hustler trained by algorithms, efficient, optimized, empty. But somewhere between noise and stillness, an ancient voice began to whisper, and everything changed. This path has carried us through the ruins of fake discipline, deep into the chambers of stillness, across the courtyard of honor, and back to the simple truth the samurai carried in his heart. A man's schedule means nothing if his spirit isn't awake. You have learned that presence dawned before the sun, that control without clarity devours itself, that devotion without purpose burns out in silence. The old ambition sought to look disciplined. The new way seeks to be disciplined. You are not building habits. You are cultivating presence. You are not designing a routine, you are constructing a way. This is a moment of rebirth, not into a new personality, but into ancient awareness. The line between practice and self begins to blur. What was once force is now fluent. The cold shower no longer proves toughness. It merely begins a morning of a man already at peace with discomfort. The list no longer rules the day. Awareness does. Even your breath feels different, less mechanical, more sacred. The boy who chased systems has evolved into the man who moves through them like water. The difference lies in knowing why. The ancient blade you carried as metaphor becomes inner clarity, sharp, unshakable, silent. Think of that figure from the beginning, the hustler sculpted by caffeine and pressure, intimidated by stillness. See him now standing again before dawn's light, but this time the eyes are alive. The same hour, the same world, entirely different presence. There are no affirmations, no camera angles, no hunger for proof. Just quiet discipline flowing through motion. He does not need to post his awakening. His calm announces it. The work is no longer heavy because the worker no longer worries. This is mastery formula, stripped of trend and trickery. Action multiplied by awareness multiplied by purpose equals mastery. Action without awareness is blind. Awareness without purpose is idle. Purpose without action is dream. The warrior learns to multiply them, precision of discipline fused with depth of presence, guided by honor. When the three align, efficiency becomes expression, and work becomes worship. The modern age told you life was a ladder, but the warrior knows it is a circle. Each dawn returns you to practice, to stillness, to awareness, and again to action. You are no longer performing discipline. Discipline performs through you. The once frantic man had become the still center around which all motion turns. You no longer wait for motivation. You wait for silence, and from silence, you strike the SO tonight. Before the next sunrise, write your warrior's declaration. Not a list of goals or metrics, but a vow. State how you will act, serve, and awaken tomorrow. Put into words the invisible architecture of your code, something that endures longer than excitement. The ink that flows from that effort is not for paper but for memory. It is how identity roots itself. Every ideal must be spoken once to become real. When you rise tomorrow, do not think, what must I do? Think, who am I becoming? That question is sharper than any sword. The man who now wakes at sunrise does not rush the light. He meets it. The old morning routine is gone, replaced by sacred rhythm. No hacking, no optimizing, no pretending. Just being. The room is still. The world holds its breath with him. Wind brushes through the trees like the faint rustle of robes. The ink dries on his declaration. Dawn stretches across still water, turning silver to gold. The morning was never the point. Becoming the man who wakes for a reason, that's the way.